The Gospel of John stands as one of the most significant and theologically rich texts in the Christian tradition. Unlike the synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, John's account is mystical and philosophical, focusing on the divine nature of Jesus and his relationship with God. For centuries, believers have drawn from this gospel to understand profound truths about Jesus' life and mission. Yet, what many Christians may not realize is that early versions of the Gospel of John may have contained teachings so radical and controversial that they were either banned or excluded from the official canon during the formation of the New Testament. What was so dangerous about these lost teachings that the early church felt compelled to suppress them? This question has sparked intense debates among scholars, theologians, and historians. By looking deeper into the history, theological implications, and the potential impact of these banned sections, we gain insight into what may be one of the greatest mysteries of early Christianity, the secret revelations of the Gospel of John. To understand how such sections could have been banned, we need to start with the historical context of early Christianity. The Gospel of John was likely written between 90 and 100 AD, several decades after the crucifixion of Jesus. This was a time of great transition and debate within the early Christian community. The followers of Jesus were spread throughout the Roman Empire, and their beliefs were not yet unified. While the synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, presented a relatively straightforward narrative of Jesus' life, John's Gospel was different. It focused less on the chronology of events and more on the meaning behind those events, particularly emphasizing the divine nature of Jesus as the Son of God. In its opening line, John's Gospel makes an audacious theological claim. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John 1:1. This introduction presents Jesus not merely as a human prophet or teacher, but as the very embodiment of divine wisdom, existing since the beginning of time. Such claims about Jesus' divinity were central to early Christian thought, but the Gospel of John may have gone even further in its original form. Some scholars suggest that early drafts of this text contained additional teachings that were seen as too radical for the fledgling Christian community, which was still forming its identity and doctrines. One of the most intriguing theories surrounding the banned sections of the Gospel of John involves its connections to Gnosticism. The Gnostics were a diverse group of early Christians who emphasized the importance of personal spiritual knowledge, gnosis, as the key to salvation. They believed that salvation came not through faith in the church or its sacraments, but through direct spiritual experiences and a deeper understanding of the divine. Gnosticism placed less emphasis on the physical resurrection of Jesus and more on the idea of spiritual enlightenment. The early church viewed Gnosticism as a threat to its authority and unity. The hierarchical structure of the church, with its emphasis on sacraments and clergy, stood in stark contrast to the Gnostic idea that individuals could achieve their own salvation through personal knowledge. Some scholars argue that certain elements of Gnostic belief may have originally been part of John's Gospel, but were later removed as the church sought to distance itself from this movement. For example, Gnostic texts often speak of Jesus as a spiritual guide who helps individuals awaken to their own divine nature, suggesting that every soul has the potential to achieve Christ-like enlightenment. If such ideas were present in early versions of John's Gospel, they would have been seen as dangerous by the early church, which wanted to maintain control over access to salvation. One of the most famous collections of Gnostic texts is the Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in Egypt in 1945. This treasure trove of early Christian writings includes several Gospels and other texts that were excluded from the New Testament. Among these is the Gospel of Thomas, which contains sayings attributed to Jesus that emphasize personal spiritual insight rather than adherence to church teachings. Although the Gospel of John is not part of the Nag Hammadi Library, some scholars have pointed to similarities between John's mystical language and the themes found in these Gnostic writings. This has led to speculation that John's Gospel may have originally contained more overtly Gnostic teachings, which were later suppressed during the formation of the New Testament. One of the most controversial ideas found in some early Christian writings, including certain interpretations of John's Gospel, is the concept of the divine feminine. This idea refers to the presence of feminine aspects within the divine, a notion that was not entirely foreign to early Christian thought, but became increasingly marginalized as the church solidified its male-dominated hierarchy. Some scholars believe that early drafts of the Gospel of John may have contained references to the divine feminine, particularly in the figure of the Holy Spirit or in the relationship between Jesus and certain female disciples. In the Gospel of John, one of the most significant moments is Jesus' appearance to Mary Magdalene after his resurrection. In John 21-18, Mary Magdalene is the first to encounter the risen Jesus, a fact that has long intrigued scholars. Why would John, writing in a patriarchal culture, emphasize Mary Magdalene's role in such a crucial event? Some have argued that this is a clue to her greater importance in early Christian thought. Certain early Christian texts, including the Gospel of Mary, suggest that Mary Magdalene held a special position as one of Jesus' closest disciples, possibly even his spiritual partner. The idea of Mary Magdalene as a central figure in Jesus' ministry, and perhaps as a symbol of the divine feminine, was later downplayed or suppressed by the institutional church. As the church sought to establish a male hierarchy, figures like Mary Magdalene, who represented a more inclusive or feminine aspect of spirituality, were pushed to the margins. Some scholars believe that early versions of John's Gospel may have contained more explicit references to Mary Magdalene's role, but these were removed or edited as part of the church's effort to solidify its patriarchal structure. Another key reason for the suppression of certain teachings in the Gospel of John may have been their challenge to the authority of the church itself. Early drafts of the Gospel, according to some interpretations, emphasized that the Christ consciousness was not exclusive to Jesus, but could be accessed by all believers. This idea of spiritual equality, that every person has the potential to become as enlightened as Jesus, was seen as a direct threat to the church's role as the mediator between humanity and God. By presenting Jesus as uniquely divine and emphasizing the necessity of the church for salvation, early church leaders were able to maintain their authority and control over the Christian community. Imagine a version of Christianity in which every believer is seen as having the potential to connect directly with God, without the need for priests or sacraments. Such a vision would have fundamentally altered the power dynamics of the early church, and it is easy to see why leaders may have felt threatened by these teachings. By excluding these ideas from the official canon, the church was able to maintain its hierarchical structure, but at the cost of a more expansive and empowering vision of spirituality. Today, many of the lost or banned teachings of early Christianity are being rediscovered and re-examined. Scholars are piecing together fragments of texts, comparing them with the canonical Gospels, and exploring the deeper meanings behind these ancient writings. The banned sections of the Gospel of John, whether they involved Gnostic ideas, the divine feminine, or the concept of spiritual equality, offer a glimpse into a version of Christianity that is more mystical, inclusive, and personal than the one that became dominant. The question that arises from these discoveries is, how different would Christianity be today if these teachings had been preserved? Would believers have a more direct relationship with the divine? Would the role of women in the church have been more prominent? And would the hierarchical structure of the church have been less rigid? These are questions that continue to provoke debate among theologians and believers alike. In conclusion, the Gospel of John, as we know it, is a profound and deeply spiritual text that has shaped Christian thought for centuries. However, the possibility that early versions of this gospel contained banned or suppressed teachings opens up a new and exciting avenue of exploration. Whether these teachings involved Gnostic beliefs, the divine feminine, or a more egalitarian vision of salvation, they challenge us to rethink the foundations of Christian faith. As scholars continue to uncover these hidden truths, we're reminded that history is often written by those in power, and that the full story of early Christianity may still be waiting to be told.